Okay, what is a kind?
Well, that's really, evolutionists ask us this all the time, and it's really a little harder to explain than nail down than, it's not like creationists can actually state this particular thing is a kind. Okay, but I would give a general description of kind as being creatures of such similarity that they are able to reproduce. Varieties within a kind represent organisms that are of the same design that are capable of reproduction. For example, there are different kinds of horse, not horse, but cat. You couldn't reproduce a cheetah with a lion. It probably would not work. The organism would not be fertilized, right? Mm-hmm. So that illustrates to us that God created more than one kind of cat, you see. So a kind is animals that can reproduce. Like, for example, you have a donkey and a horse or a mule, I forgot which it is, can reproduce and create, create a mule, donkey, and a horse? Yeah, I think. So they're obviously the same kind. But the problem for evolution is that the donkey, I think the mule is offspring, I believe. It's sterile, so it can't reproduce. See, that's a dead end for evolution right there. Evolutionists claim speciation has produced all this variety of life, but actually genetics demonstrates that there's great limits to genetic variability. To the ability of things to speciate. There's limits. You get to an end somewhere, and that's it. They cannot reach the kind. But I'll say there's a field of science that creationists are working on called baraminology, in which they are attempting to actually, using genetics and other things, and morphology, attempting to recreate as many of the biblical kinds as they can, the original created kinds.
If I may jump in too, you're on to something there, Neff. It's true. At one point, what was a species? The scientists had to sit down and decide, okay, this is the definition of a species. This is how we're going to define species. It's a man-made term. And as for what is a kind, that is really kind of a relatively new question that's been presented, from evolutionists to the creationists. Well, what's a kind? What do you call a kind? Well, to be honest, I don't know if we've ever really had to define what a kind is. So there are creationist scientists that are actually working on what defines a kind, what defines that word, what is going to be included within that, and how does that fit within the scientific community. And it just hasn't been done quite yet. So it's not exactly an answer. It's not exactly what you're probably looking for. But the truth is, just like the word species, even today, scientists still, they still struggle with exactly what is a species, what isn't a species, how do we classify this, how do we classify that. The same type of process has to be done from the creationist side, and that is, what is a kind? How do we define a kind? What are we going to use for a kind, and how do we fit that into the scientific thing? So the best we can do is give you what Neff's given you from the kind definition, but until it's actually been defined later on, we can't give you that definite definition. But they are working on that particular, they are working on that definition and how to define something as a kind and what constitutes a kind. That's the best I can give you, too, from my side.
Okay,
very well said.
So, if I may, if you had to guess, how many kinds went on the ark?
John, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I don't have a clue. I couldn't even begin to guess, really. I honestly, we still have to. I'm with you on the standpoint of we still have to define a kind. What exactly is a kind? From right now, I could tell you there were 1,000 kinds. Well, after we actually define a kind, maybe it was 700 kinds. Maybe it was 3,000 kinds. It's a wide target. We have to define the kind first before we can actually start to give you a little bit more definite example of what it is.
In likelihood, there were thousands, actually, a few thousand at least, probably, of kind, because of the tremendous variety of insects. There would have been far less of mammals. But, yeah, there was quite a few.
Yeah, quite a few I know isn't much of an exact answer for you. I'm sorry about that.
Right.
But the truth is, until they define what a kind is, where can we can't really take it anywhere. That's the best we can give you right now.
Yeah. Okay, Qdragon, thanks for calling in. We're going to take another call now, okay?
Oh, one more question. One more question. So let's say, for sake of argument, that there's 3,000 kinds. Do you realize how many millions of species would have to evolve from those 3,000 animals?
Yeah, I do. And first off, I don't agree that that's evolution. Speciation doesn't constitute evolutionary change because it doesn't change morphology. As you increase varieties within a kind, you don't get any change to morphology. You just get cosmetic changes such as size, color, shape, and pattern. These are not morphological differences. They're variety. Look at there's 6 billion human beings on the earth. No two of them are just alike unless they're identical twins, right? So look at the tremendous genetic variability of humankind, mankind. Take an Aborigine and a Celt, or a Chinese person and a Slav, and you compare them. I mean, they can look considerably different, right? But they're 100% human. They all have exactly the same organs in the same location in their body plans. They have all the same structures. No human being has any morphological difference from any other human being, regardless of this tremendous difference in appearance, you see. So speciation doesn't constitute evolutionary change. And so I think it's an example of actually intelligent design that life is capable of speciating like this and creating such variety that there's so much information built into so much variability created in the DNA recipe for a kind that the offspring of that kind can have such a great variety but without changing morphology. There's a limit there. Okay, thank you for calling in, Qdragon. We're going to take another call now.